Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Diana Bittner, co-founder and chief medical officer of True Women's Health, and I'm joined tonight by...
Hi, I'm Dr. Celia Egan. I'm an internal medicine physician as well as an obesity medicine specialist. And I guess I'm a menopause specialist by now, right?
Yes,
I've been
you
doing
are.
this a good time. Yeah.
I'm Suzanne Patagru. I'm the physician assistant. I'm also a certified menopause practitioner and also have a little bit of focus on functional medicine as well.
Awesome. I can see my title, NCMP, isn't there, but also a certified menopause provider and OBGYN by background. Everyone, we're here tonight to talk about our team-based approach at True Women's Health. We believe that all women deserve to have a team who can see them holistically. And, as a OBGYN physician, even, I wasn't taught about gender-specific health. And I always wanted to be a part of a team that saw women, again, very holistically. Like, here I am, a hormone specialist, but I know that the heart exists. And I always wanted to work with other providers like Dr. Egan, who specializes in heart, and I'll let her talk more about that, but also who knows that hormones exist. And Suzanne, with her expertise in cancer wellness and survivorship, she'll talk about that as well, but knows all about hormones and internal medicine and primary care. And so I'm here tonight to talk about all this together, and we're going to bring you some stories about some patients that we've seen in terms of our approach and how we take care of our patients at True. So,
and Dr. B, just a reminder to all of our patients, if anyone has any questions for us, they can always put a question into the comment section and we'll try to answer those.
I love it. I think one of the other things we wanted to talk a little bit about is just the importance of having a team of providers like we have at True Women's Health. Not only just 3 practitioners, but also 3 practitioners who have very specific expertise and the wonderful care that is possible when you have 3 people who, number one, have a passion for their jobs, but also are able to collaborate about your healthcare. We each of us have a specific area of expertise, a niche that we decided that we have a really, really big interest in. And when we put that all together, it really is available to patients to give them optimal care. It really is stimulating and fun. And I think our patients notice the difference that type of team approach is really able to share with patients.
Exactly. And we have a whole group of nurses and staff that just surrounds our patients. Everyone was hired on purpose. Our goal was that our patients would want to see all of the people in our team as much as they would want to see us. So they feel like they've got a whole family taking care of them.
Yeah. And one of the fun things that I think patients may or may not know is that we have kind of weekly team meetings where we bring up kind of patients that we all want everyone's opinion on. And it's just so, from an internal medicine perspective, it's just so much fun to very quickly hear from, a gynecologist and someone who's doing, has a history in cancer wellness, and even our pelvic floor therapist. When we have these questions, to be able to come up very quickly with a kind of well thought out plan, and versus, kind of sending people to the referral abyss where a couple of weeks later, maybe I'll get a note and I don't really know what happened. But to be able to have this sort of quick feedback and a plan that's formed a lot of the times very quickly after we hear about patient cases.
Yes. And what I love too is that our team has a lot of experience in primary care and OBGYN offices. So we're constantly looking to improve our process, to make sure we're getting back to people very quickly with results and having them feel like, again, there's this seamless approach around them. So we're really excited to talk tonight. And, again, women, I believe, deserve this kind of care. They deserve to know as much as they can about their bodies and know all the options that are available to them.
Yeah. And I do think it's a really exciting time with so much new science coming out with a lot of the questions that patients have for us. So it's fun to be able to stay up to date about this new stuff. And honestly, right, 3 heads are better than one, right? To sort of do all the sorts of reading and all the necessary background to keep our patients safe and be able to answer all their questions.
Yeah, and really, challenge each other too, like on new topics that are coming up. And, we have some really fun debates that I think keep us all sharp. And just, again, I love coming to work. And so anyways, I thought, again, those of you listening, feel free to put in comments. If you're hearing this after the fact, feel free to private message, and then we can get back to you as well. But I thought we'd jump right in and talk about, for example, a patient, of course, not her real name. Her name is Jane. Jane was 48, and, she came in and asked this question, I don't feel like myself. I'm just not me. And I just am having a very difficult time with engaging in life. And as I asked her more about what was hard for her, she said, I don't feel motivated. I feel, I can't define it, but I just don't like how I feel. So what I asked her to do is, flip it to the positive. What do you want? At True, we believe in goal setting. We want to know where patients want to go so we can help them along the journey. And as she started to talk about what she wanted, there were tears that she wanted to be energetic. She wanted to be really engaged in her family's life. Her one child was going off to college. She had two other in high school. Her husband was very busy, and when they were home together, she wanted to engage versus feel like just, hiding away and staring at the wall. So
yeah, this is such a common complaint that we get in office visits. So I think it's a really pivotal one, and most people listening will probably be able to relate to this because most of us have felt like this at some point or another. And one of the things that I always like to talk about, when I hear this is I'm just not me, is just to talk about, well, what is the you that you are hoping to become again, or even taking it to a next level of what's the new that actually fits who you are now? Because sometimes patients will say, well, I'm not the person, I'm half the woman I used to be, or I'm not what I was when I was in my 20s. Well, that sometimes has really awesome memories and all of this, but sometimes actually looking forward and looking at the phase of a woman's life, sometimes it's really creating that new version of a woman's self that's actually a little bit different than the old self, but actually becomes a better one than she even imagined that she would become. And so the other thing that I really love to talk about is, what are some of the, as she's setting her goal and defining what she wants, what are some of the kind of non-negotiable things that you have to kind of invest in your health to actually feel good. And this is something that we do a lot at True Women's Health, a system that Dr. Bittner designed called SEEDS, which stands for 7 Essential Elements of Daily Success. And it just stands for some of the daily lifestyle habits that we build on that really are building blocks for almost moving forward in any stage of life, irrelevant of what the specific goals are. So, it includes things like water intake. It includes having good habits around sleep habits, getting in appropriate nutrients, including vitamins and supplements, adequate amounts of fiber, and looking at what are our habits around physical activity and what are our habits around mind-body connection, and talking about what does a woman want to feel like, but also what are some of the basics that kind of go into allowing a woman to move in that direction.
I totally, yeah. Coming up with this, it's like so many women say, well, is there just can I just take a medication, or is there, how do I do this? How do I become the person that I want to be? And it's getting back to the foundation and the very basics. I think sometimes we think this kind of stuff will just happen. We'll just, of course I'm drinking enough water. But when we really start to track it and see, am I really drinking 80 ounces a day, especially adding in that extra coffee and maybe a glass of wine, it's adding enough water to make up for that. So, these seeds can be really helpful. And you can see the link in the chat to see the seeds ebook. There's a whole book that you could download and read more detail around the seeds, but super critical to have these habits in place. So when you see someone that comes in and says this, how do you approach this?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of women will come to me and, really get, not themselves, has a lot to do with usually their weight, and they'll fixate a little bit on a number or a size. And, a lot of the times we work on kind of moving beyond that number and sort of saying, let's think about our seeds. Do we have a fitness goal in mind that sort of makes sense? Maybe being able to always be able to pick up a grandkid or swing a golf club. Maybe that's something we should work towards. Or what's our relationship with food like? I will say, a lot of the times when women are struggling with weight, they will say it's because they have some sort of niche in their relationship with food, meaning, I know what to eat, but everyone in my house has already eaten pizza and I'm eating leftover, little kid pizza crust. Or, I do fine all week, but then my husband and I go out to eat every night of the weekend and I just have no self-control in the restaurant. And so it's really working on all these different smaller goals, fitness goals, our relationship with food, how are we going to handle, that social event, and kind of letting go a little bit of, wait, this number is a number, but you're so much more than that. Right. And if we can fix, thinking about getting to your fitness goal, working on a relationship with food, then, your weight's going to be what it's going to be. And we'll kind of work towards all these other pieces to kind of get you to your goals.
Right. Well, I just got back from a hiking trip with my son, and my goal was really to keep up with him, which of course I'm not going to keep up with maybe a 21-year-old, which I didn't, but yet I really felt like I was able to do everything I wanted to do. And for months beforehand, that's what got me off the Triscuits and peanut butter. Thank you, Celia, in the afternoon. And it got me, it kept me lifting weights and all of that. So it was a bigger goal, but then I broke it down to smaller goals. And, I'm really happy that I did, because I was able to do what I wanted to do. So I love how we all together think about this and really help women come to that. A lot of times when they come saying, I don't feel like myself, they say, I just want a plan.
Yeah. And I do think it is shocking for women, even like we'll say to pick a seat. If anyone has a hesitation, I'll be like, just pick one, right? And kind of get started. And you may be shocked how much you're not doing it. I think the water is one that is always shocking to people, that they'll just be like, oh my holy smokes, like I really thought I was hydrating myself, but I'm actually not. And it can be helpful even just to pick one and get started.
Yeah, I agree with that. Fiber is another one that I noticed that most of us like overestimate how much we actually eat of fiber. And gosh, it's like fiber affects almost every body system. So it's a really,
I feel like one of the biggest eye openers is for fiber. People be like, well, I have salads. Like, let's just look at the fiber sheet and see where lettuce falls.
Or I eat my apple. It's like, oh, well, that has 4 grams in it.
Yeah, and a pear, thank goodness, 5. And I had to give up bananas because of not much fiber. I was so bummed. But bananas only have 3. But Dr. Egan, I love the fiber sheet that you put together, and so many patients now rely on that. It's been a really good thing.
The other thing I want to mention is just, Celia, what you were talking about, not necessarily focusing on a specific body weight, but also, we tend to, use these fancy scales in the office that give us, other information that's not just focused 100%. On that one number. That is such pivotal information in terms of looking at percent body fat and percent muscle mass, and how important that is in looking at having a healthy body composition, and looking at how this can change in different phases of a woman's life, and the importance of being able to maintain muscle mass as we age, and kind of just having that conversation in the office about how one might do that, and really looking at that over time as another parameter.
Sure. So quick follow-up on Jane. So Jane, was able to put together her goal, and it was all about her daughter was graduating, and so she wanted to make sure she was feeling good for that. And so really for her, it became a focus on moods that were changing with perimenopause. So again, we went through her seeds, we went through her symptoms, and we went through her phase of ovarian function, and putting that together with her goal, we made a plan, and over a course of a couple months, then she felt like herself again. So again, I just love what we get to do at True.
I would say one of my favorite, things that I've learned with being at True is sort of thinking first and foremost about a woman's phase of ovarian function, because it really has changed the way that we in medicine, we talk about forming what we call a differential diagnosis when people have a symptom of all the possible different things that could be. And if I don't know a woman's phase of ovarian function, or haven't even thought about it, it's harder, right? Because menopause will creep in. There's a lot of other things that sort of will shift and restructure the order by which I'm thinking of someone's, like a disease process for someone's symptoms. So, I think that that's one of my favorite things that I've learned that's been quite helpful in helping figure out how to help women and get their symptoms taken care of.
Yeah, I think it should be right, like in, if you guys listening, if you go to the Epic or you go to your medical chart and you read, we'll say in our assessment, like Jane was 48 and she has this problem. I would much rather it say Jane is 48, she's in perimenopause, so it's right there. It just right away helps get us all thinking about where she's at. And Stacy, I promise I see your question. I think as we talk about our next patient, Susan, not her real name, we'll get into answering your question, and that's something that Dr. Egan can talk all about. So Susan was 51, and she came in and she said, I work with all men, and I'm so embarrassed at work. I'm having hot flashes, and at night I'm waking up 3 times at least with night sweats, and I'm just so tired all the time. I am gaining weight. I'm losing hair. Like, help me. I need a plan. So, Celia, how about you want to take this one and start with your approach?
Sure. So, I mean, of course, it's, when we talk about goal setting, obviously a lot of women are like, less hot flashes, please. Right. So it seems pretty easy. Of course, we want to know where someone's at in terms of their phase of ovarian function. And most of these women are headed into the perimenopause time or already in menopause. And something that's really interesting, particularly when thinking about treatment, next steps in treatment, is just to kind of review again kind of the role of menopause and what that has to do with our overall metabolic health, or I think of our body's processing of energy. And with energy comes fat storage. And so that, leads to sometimes women gaining weight. So although, the FDA has not approved hormone replacement therapy or giving our body back estrogen that's lost as it goes through sort of the natural aging, or our ovaries don't give us as much estrogen as they did before, although it's not an approved FDA indication for hormone replacement therapy for weight loss, we definitely know that there's a connection between a lack of estrogen, a change and shift in how our body handles sugar processing, a process we would call insulin resistance, and extra weight. And it was really interesting because even at the last the obesity medicine conference, they, for the first time, had a really great lecture on menopause and kind of looking at the science behind the shifts and changes. Most likely, a lot of these things are happening at our liver, because our liver is basically the overall processor of all the sugars that we eat. And that link between insulin, which is sort of regulating some of that sugar, and estrogen is so spot on right there. And that's probably the beginning of where we're seeing some of this. Additionally, what may be happening is as our body loses estrogen, there's probably also a link with loss of skeletal muscle. Those are our big boy muscles that, make up our glutes and our quads and our biceps. We see that a steady decline of muscle mass as women go through menopause, and that also can contribute to our body's inability to handle sugars, which just down the line adds to more weight gain. So obviously it's really complicated, all these different shifts and movements, but what we do know is that our body likes having estrogen on board, and it really does, even in small amounts, and it really can help sort of smooth out some of that energy processing that can prevent some of this extra weight gain that we see in menopause. That was a really long answer.
That was a really good answer. I liked all of that.
It was a really good answer.
Yeah.
And I think, again, it's, to break this down into where her phase is. So for Susan, she had a hysterectomy, and so she's having all these symptoms, but she didn't know where she was because she wasn't having periods because she had a hysterectomy. And so I was able to, check a hormone level. We don't check hormone levels just to check levels, but for her, it was just really reassuring to see that, yes, her FSH, her follicle stimulating hormone, was really high, meaning the brain was telling the ovary to work, and the ovary's like, I got nothing. So her FSH was high, her estrogen level was really low. And so we knew that she was likely at least in late perimenopause, if not menopause. So it really helped her to understand it wasn't, her doing, but she was definitely having symptoms that made sense. And just everything happens at once. I think about this phase like the perfect storm, that the symptoms happen at the same time as the physiology. So her symptoms, she was so tired, she didn't feel like working out. So her muscle mass is declining with lack of estrogen, but also she wasn't working out, so she wasn't maintaining her muscle mass.
It does really create a snowball effect that can be really difficult to overcome, right, without any sort of thought or plan to it.
Yeah, I think this case really exemplifies the importance of talking about this phase of ovarian function and defining it in a way that is helpful in terms of coming up with a treatment plan. And also using this scale that we typically use on all of our patients who came into the office. And we call this scale the MTS scale, menopause transition scale. And it allows our women who come in to rate their symptoms each time they come in. And the symptoms are used for things like hot flashes, whether or not they're struggling with weight, whether or not sex drive is an issue, whether or not fatigue is an issue, whether or not vaginal symptoms are an issue, whether or not bleeding problems are an issue. And it just allows a woman to kind of rate those symptoms at each and every visit. And again, allows her just to kind of track how she's doing. Because a lot of times, we'll see someone and they come back and it's hard to kind of quantitate, like, am I better? Am I not better? And so it just kind of helps to give some feedback. In a patient like this, in addition to the hormones, I would be, checking some labs. The tiredness can be multifactorial. Menopause and perimenopause can certainly shift energy levels and cause changes in hair growth. But things like checking a thorough assessment of the thyroid, not just a TSH, but some expanded labs on that. Checking for iron deficiency anemia, things like that. The other thing I always focus on almost with everyone is stress and, the effect of stress on overall health and what impact it might be having on symptoms, how it drives hot flashes, how it can drain us of our energy, how it can, because it pumps up that hormone called cortisol. It can help us to hold on to body fat because our body thinks it might need some quick energy. And so it has this quick fuel source that it's holding on to. And so that's always kind of a part of a case like this that I would also look at. And it's a really interesting conversation to go over what are sources of stress and some tips and strategies for how to work on that.
I'm kind of laughing to myself because I think about, we get so excited about all these different aspects of a woman's health. And it's really hard sometimes not to overload, because people are like, there's so much, where do I start? And again, Celia, your point, it's like, okay, phase of ovarian function, what are your seeds? What are your symptoms? And, exactly. And then here are labs. And I love how we all do this. We all draw pictures and write and make people a very specific list. So when they leave, there might be lots to think about, but yet they leave with a very specific plan, what we're going to do to follow up, and, and make sure that what we talk about actually is working. And so I love how we have our system where people can just text us anytime and ask follow-up questions, and we're right there. Today, talking with a patient, she was like, the one of the things I love most about being a patient at True is I know that you're always going to be there. I know I can text and someone will get back to me. So I think that's a really important part. So I wonder if you wanted to address Stacy's question here in terms of when
I don't know which. I think the spelling may be a bit off. Fenzoza. I think that may be that. I don't know if she's talking about the FDA approved medication that just got approved for hot flashes,
or maybe Victoza.
Stacey, are you still there? Can you clarify which med you're asking about?
Yeah,
it might be the new med by Astellas for hot flashes.
Yes, she said.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. So if I can talk, we probably should have talked about that with the first gal. Sorry about that. I was thinking you were talking about one of the weight loss meds. So very briefly on this med, this is a medicine that is, as you see, just FDA approved. It works on the thermostat. So we know that the thermostat in our brains is what triggers a hot flash. And in menopause with loss of estrogen, our comfort zone gets really narrow. So before menopause, we tolerate a 2-degree swing above 98.6 and a 2-degree swing below without hot flashing or shivering. But in menopause, as estrogen drops, then our comfort zone is very narrow. Many people in menopause will say, I'm always too hot or I'm always too cold. There's been a lot of great research to help us understand the actual nerves, the neurons that are in the thermostat and what triggers them. And this med by Astellas is the first medicine. It's called a candy neuron agonist. And it works on actually those receptors. So this is the first drug out, and there's another drug coming out by Bayer called elezonitant that is very similar. And this is, again, the first one to be approved. What's so great is these are medicines that are non-hormonal, but they work very well on hot flashes and night sweats. And so, we'll get to see as they're just coming out. It's not available yet on the market. It's FDA approved, but again, we can't write a prescription for it today. But as we learn more about when this is available, we'll definitely be talking about this and let you all know on our Facebook private page and public page that this is out and we can talk about it. If you're a patient at True, then we can talk about potentially in prescribing this.
That's pretty exciting.
Very exciting, especially for women, for example, who've had breast cancer and estrogen's not an option, or perhaps it's been more than 10 years since your last period and you have too many risk factors in terms of heart disease, you have metabolic syndrome, you have other risk factors for hormones. So these are going to be just incredible drugs and options for people to feel better. And Laura is asking, why do some people get hot flashes and some night sweats? Laura, it's just, hello, great to see you. There are, we're all so different. We know that 80% of women suffer hot flashes and night sweats to the point that affects their quality of life, but 20% don't. And partly it can be that they have already a really healthy lifestyle in terms of they've kept their weight off, they've kept their muscle mass high, they're lucky that they're not insulin resistant, they're drinking their water, they're doing their seeds. So for some women, it really depends on all these triggers. And for some women, it's just good luck that their thermostat isn't so sensitive.
My personal belief has something to do with the liver and sugars and the sugar processing, but I have no evidence to support that. That's just looking at data and making some theories.
Sure.
I'm shouting it out right now that it's recorded so that in 20 years, you're going to be like, Dr. Egan said that.
Okay, very good. Yes. So it's just fascinating. And again, it's interesting. There's a study called the SWAN study of women across the nation. And it really helped us understand how women of different socioeconomic, cultural heritage, women of Asian descent don't tend to have many hot flashes, night sweats. They tend to have more mood issues. And we know women of color, especially women of color who are overweight and maybe have higher blood sugars, they tend to have hot flashes very early and they last a long, long time. So it's just having that perspective that we're all different and we have to have that individualized approach. So Celia, with Susan, weight gain was also an issue. Would you want to talk about that a bit for goal setting or?
Yeah, I think a lot of the time, particularly if people need to lose, a good deal of weight, of course, we think about nutritional changes, of course, and we lean a lot on seeds of focusing on getting in fiber and protein and really trying to live on simple sugars to, one a day and reflecting on that. But a lot of the times, even despite doing that and working on a relationship with food, medications for patients who are obese, for women who are obese are a great option. There's a lot of new medicines that are out now that are really exciting and that we're seeing really great results with. A lot of people are quite hesitant, kind of like hormones about thinking about using a weight loss medication. But a lot of the times, if you really have tried to maximize your efforts in terms of nutritional changes, you're getting moving and getting to the gym, you're working in a relationship with food, there's just at some point that it's become sort of a time game, and that if we can get, weight off sooner and sort of reverse that snowball effect that's happened with, the loss of muscle mass and really trying to make some changes with the energy processing at your liver, it can be really exciting. Another aspect of it is being able to make that good food choice. A lot of women talk about that voice that they hear constantly calling them towards, maybe simple carbohydrates. So, simple sugars and then sugars and fats together really activate that reward center in our brain that make it almost difficult to turn those things down. And when we have any sort of trigger, so the trigger could be, a stressful conversation with your boss, or, even everyone in your family got pizza and you see the pizza and you hear the pizza box and you smell it and you can almost feel the grease on your face. All of a sudden your brain's like, ooh, I really want pizza. And that's all I can think about right now. And there's certain drugs that really turn that reward system down so that, maybe it's not no pizza, but it's a piece and you have a salad versus you had a half of a pizza and you feel terrible and guilty about yourself. And it just creates that further like guilt shame cycle that happens that no woman deserves. So it's definitely worth a conversation with either myself or with Suzanne to talk about some of these weight loss drugs. And as I said, the science is really exciting. And this next, year or so, they're going to approve particularly probably tirzepatide for the treatment of obesity and patients who are overweight with a comorbidity such as insulin resistance. And we'll probably really get started with reversing a lot of this metabolic disease that we've seen, I think, for the first time ever, which would be quite exciting.
So exciting. And before, the only real option was bariatric surgery, right? So, I mean, these meds are making that surgery is just not going to be as prevalent. How do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the first time, we've been able to experience, on average, real weight loss results. So there were a couple of medications, Qsimi and Contrave, that were available, but on average, the weight loss results weren't quite what we've seen with bariatric surgery. So that's why bariatric surgery still sort of remained the standard of care for obesity. There's a select group of people where those drugs work, and we've seen them in our office, right? And you're like, wow, we put that was your drug for you, and it really works, and it's very exciting. But in terms of more just quantity of patients that they're helpful for, these new class of medications are probably going to be on par with bariatric surgery. So for patients who don't want to do bariatric surgery, it may be a great next option.
Well, and two, I think about, menopause almost as a gift. Like for Susan, it was a gift in terms of her hot flashes, her night sweats, her fatigue helped her come in. And, we know that what we do at 50 or at midlife predicts 80. It's not what we do at 70 that predicts 80. It's what we do at 50. So if a woman has high blood sugars and prediabetes or diabetes and obesity, her blood vessel linings are sticky, right? So then fat sticks and she starts to develop risk factors for a heart attack and for stroke and for dementia. And so like, I just want everyone to know what they can do at midlife so we can start to reduce these preventable illnesses that don't have to happen. And a lot of women come in and say, my grandma has dementia. I don't want dementia. Okay, we got to get on it at 50. We can't wait until 70. Mm-hmm. So I just love that we have these drugs as options to help women kind of get things how they want them before, I don't want to say too late, but before it gets so hard and maybe we miss that window of opportunity.
Yeah. And I speak again a lot about our relationship with food, right? And I think nothing in our food system is designed to make that journey easy. When you go into the store, there's a lot of treats. They kind of smack you right in the face, right? And it just makes it hard. And there's so many different triggers, and our whole behavioral system of how we sort of make ourselves feel better is just so complicated and tied into food that to all of a sudden after 50 years being like, I was doing this since I was a little kid of rewarding myself with food, and now I'm just going to stop without any help it's just hard. And women are taking care of so many people, right? They're taking care of their kids and their partners and their parents and their bosses and their employees and their neighbor and everyone else that like, it's just like, we just want to help you out. Like, that's it. And so it can be just a very good conversation to have.
What I really appreciate is what we at True have really learned from you, Dr. Egan, in terms of like the fact that we can now approach obesity as a chronic disease. It's not just about being overweight. It's not about the fact that a woman doesn't eat right or hasn't succeeded in the appropriate exercise program. That's really considered a very real thing. And we can treat it like we do diabetes. We can treat it like we do hypertension. And we don't take people off medications because they get to their weight necessarily, just like you wouldn't take someone off a high blood pressure medicine when their blood pressure meets goal. So that just the reset. And I just enjoy having that discussion with patients because it's not, the awareness isn't very high out there about that. And so it's just awesome to be able to offer that to patients.
Yeah. And I think
really
it's
good point.
Really interesting because I think there's even parts of why our bodies are holding on to extra weight that we're not 100% even privy to. We speak so much about the microbiome in our office, and and seeds is geared towards that, which is using that fiber to support the microbiome, getting tons of water and not having a lot of stress, because that may be a piece of this whole process of holding on to extra weight that we don't need. And so, we take that quite seriously.
Yeah, and just want to mention too, part of our team is Anna. Anna is a Culinary Institute trained chef. She's just finished her training for a registered dietitian, and she also, ran a diabetes prevention program in Chicago, ran a hospital kitchen. She's has a degree in nutrition. Anna's amazing. And so in our complete program, time with Anna is included. And so people will love it. They'll have a FaceTime with Anna in the house. Family members will sometimes join in, and she gives suggestions and recipes. And today I saw a patient who can't wait to meet with her to figure out how to get more protein in her diet with her dietary restrictions. So it's just really exciting to have Anna on our team. And so just so you all know that she's there, and she's awesome. And on our private Facebook page, Anna has given cooking classes, and we've got recipes, and her black bean brownies are to die for. So that's
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites. So that's great. So I can't believe it's already been 35 minutes. So let's move into our third gal to talk about, Tony. She's 41. She came into the office and she said, I feel so wired. My brain won't turn off. I can't fall asleep for, over an hour and a half, and I'm just irritable and I don't feel right. Suzanne, I think this is kind of one of your favorite topics.
Yeah, it's a really super common one that comes up a lot. And again, I would always start out with, these are the really problematic symptoms that are getting in the way of living. And so if a woman were to kind of rewrite what she wants her life to look like and feel like, what is that? And kind of starting with that as a starting point. And then, staying curious, as Dr. Bittner always talks about, staying curious around learning, like, what's contributing to this? What are the habits? What are the stressors? What's been tried? What's worked? What hasn't worked? And, commonly feeling wired and not sleeping and not having focus, nutrition can play a huge role in this, lack of sleep or sleep hygiene, and whether or not sleep is actually restorative can play such a role in it. The relaxation response is always something that I talk to when these symptoms come up, and just the effect of, when our body spends so much time in fight or flight, that stress response. And who doesn't have stress in their lives right now? It's just a matter of how much. And so our bodies tend to have the HPA axis is kind of the medical term for it. The hypothalamus talks to the pituitary, that talks to the adrenal gland, and it just turns on the stress response that pushes up a hormone called cortisol, and it just makes us feel wired and tired. We can't sleep. We don't feel ourselves, and not to mention the fact that it causes weight gain of all else things. And so really kind of digging deeper to look at what are some of the root causes of that, and getting at what might be things that are strategies that might help. One of which is always, doing breathing techniques and looking at habits, and assessing a woman's circadian rhythm. Is her sleep cycle what it's supposed to be? Many times when we're stuck in fight or flight, the circadian rhythm is actually backwards. It's like the cortisol is peaking in the middle of the night. I wonder if that's contributing to the hot flashes or the night sweats in the middle of the night, by the way. And so kind of just, discovering what's going on there, and then working on, what are some ways to find her way back in terms of where she wants to be. And sometimes this involves adding supplements, medications, doing lab works, doing a really thorough physical exam.
Exactly. And so thyroid is something I know you like to talk about. If someone is maybe hyper or hypo, if someone asks you about thyroid, where do you go with that?
Yeah, I mean, this patient, her symptoms being wired and having insomnia and hard time focusing would make me wonder about more of a hyperthyroid state, which is more of an overactive thyroid. And so doing lab tests to rule that out. And there are simple lab tests that can help us to get at the root of that. Yeah.
No, cool. And sometimes I think about when a woman's, like, let's say brain chemicals are off. Let's say she's got so many unresolved events that she's just constantly spinning in terms of thinking about, like, worried about a kid who's not doing well in school, or worried about a relationship that's not going well, or worried about job security. So it's that constant, mind circling and on one topic. And so especially if, let's say, the estrogen is low as well, let's say in late perimenopause, we go through our brain chemical a lot quicker when our estrogen is low. And genetically, some people just don't make as much brain chemical as others. And that's where sometimes, again, the breathing techniques, metered breathing, gratitude is such a powerful tool. I know, Suzanne, you and I talk a lot about Dr. Benson and, his work. We live in this stressful world, but how can we keep our inside calm? And sometimes just breathing techniques and all of that really is helpful. Sometimes we have to add a medication. Today, talking to a person about these medications are not Band-Aids, they're not uppers, they're not downers. They're simply adding in brain chemical to help the brain get out of those circular thinking.
Yeah. And I think going back to, knowing phase of ovarian function again, because, kind of knowing that a woman's in perimenopause and hormones are kind of off balance in terms of doing that delicate dance that is normal, or knowing that she's in menopause. It just helps us to guide in terms of kind of knowing, whether or not hormones might be another driver of these symptoms. And again, reiterating what you said, that when estrogen levels drop, serotonin follows. And when serotonin is out of balance, we tend to not feel very relaxed, and our mood is out of whack, and it can certainly contribute to symptoms like this.
Celia, what?
I see a lot of women talking about kind of the very different twist. A lot of women will come to me and say, I think I have dementia because I can't remember anything. So I must be having some brain damage. And when you start speaking with them, a lot of the times it is ending up this inability to be able to focus, because you have to remember you're unable to make memories if your brain's in a place where it's spinning on thoughts and quickly jumping from one thought to the next, because that's not the logical part of our brain. That's a separate part of our brain that's trying to sort of find some contentment, and it will love to spin on those ideas. And so it can be really interesting to have that conversation. And, I talk to a lot of patients about the metered breathing, because it allows our brain even just something to chew on in that moment, right? Because what happens even with meditation, I know a lot of women will hesitate about meditation just because they feel as though if they try to clear their mind blank, that all floods in, right? What I have to do in the shopping list and all the things, right? And so that's why I do love metered breathing, because it does give your brain a task to do, and as well as gratitude thinking, right? Because it's a stepping stone towards trying to meditate. And I will always tell people, if you have not been a meditator and you've trying to sit down for the first time for 30 minutes, it ain't happening. So sit down. It's just like exercise, right? You have to sit down and try like even a 3-minute time frame of trying to clear the mind and starting.
And sometimes if you're starting at a baseline of feeling wired and not having focus, sometimes that meditative state needs to come during movement. So walking in nature and doing deep breathing, that's a better fit.
Yeah.
I also think my other recommendation for a lot of women is to touch in with some sort of nature, because that physical stimuli can also be really helpful of rebooting the brain a bit, right? Feeling the grass, hearing birds, smelling fresh air, right? That kind of stuff can be really helpful. And we better enjoy these few lovely Michigan months.
Yeah. I'm just laughing to myself because I hear us saying very similar things, but we have a little different perspective. We have a little different experience. And I just love that, again, that we are able to approach, but the principles are the same, and that sort of feeds into Valerie's question. Thank you, Valerie, so much for your comment. We're just honored to get to be with you on your journey. In terms of how we decide patients to see, a lot of times number one, we let patients decide, what feels right to them as they get to know all of us. So in our complete program, what happens is sometimes it's based on your most bothersome symptom, like what's bugging you the most. If weight's the issue that you're most concerned with, you'll likely see Dr. Egan first. If it's thyroid or mood, then you'll likely see Suzanne first. If it's hot flashes, you're more likely to see me, or as the gynecologist if there's bleeding issues. Again, what's cool is we all can address all of these issues, but we do have specialties and favorite things. I always say, I'll stay in my lane. If I don't know something, I'll tell you. I think we're all very similar in that, and we talk to each other a lot. In the complete program, we look at wellness with 9 areas, from activity and obesity. And so we could go through all that, but we look at those areas. And so for a patient in the complete program, we want to make sure that by the first 3, 4, or 5 visits that we've touched on all these areas of wellness. So specifically, I like to focus, of course, on F, which is phase of ovarian function. And I love A and B as well. Love talking about bones. Suzanne, though, is our resident bone expert. And of course, Celia too. But we all have our favorite areas. And then, when it comes to very specific risk stratification for heart, for diabetes, then Dr. Egan. And then, of course, for complete, we're your primary care. So I cannot be primary care for people's insurance. So of course that's Suzanne and Celia. And so again, it depends a bit on what's needed, what people prefer. And you might resonate at a certain time better with one of us than the other, but we're all here for you. And I hope to answer your questions. How would you guys answer that? I rambled a bit.
No, I think that's a great, answer. We, try to have patients drive who they would like to see. And honestly, Frankie, sometimes it's just time. who's available when that person needs to be seen, and trying to get in to see, we try to get at most sick visits. We see people relatively very quickly, probably faster than any other office in Grand Rapids. But, if for follow-ups and stuff, if you love Monday afternoons, that just may be a Suzanne day.
Yeah, I do think we try to work hard with matching the patient's concern and what they're wanting to focus on with the practitioner who has that as their niche, and then feed into patient preferences. And most of our patients in the complete program end up seeing most of us, I think. But it varies quite a bit depending on days of preferences, days of the week, exactly, and timing and all that.
Or if I'm seeing a patient and there's a question about skin, I'm not very good at skin stuff, so I'll call Suzanne. Suzanne, will you please come on? Yeah. So again, I just love our team approach, and then of course having Kara in the office who works for iMove and is a physical therapist in the office, and the rest of her team. So again, it's just great having all of us together in the office. So thanks for that, Valerie. What I'd love to get to, and I'm sure it will bring up more conversation again, as we're already here almost an hour, is 5 takeaway tips that we'd like to leave you all with. So tip number 1 is, I think we've talked about this a lot, but we can keep talking about this, is know your phase of ovarian function. Celia, I love how you talked about this, that this was something that was really, adding in for me, knowing phase of ovarian function in terms of, again, when the risk of preventable illness happens. So menopause being one of the most dramatic risk factors for obesity, for diabetes, for heart disease, for depression. So important. And, this to determine a phase of ovarian function, we're looking at cycles and periods. But again, if a woman has an IUD or she's had a period, then sometimes we'll draw hormone levels.
I think it's just so helpful, and knowing, even listening to women's symptoms and trying to understand what other tests to order. I mean, it's just one of those things that you have to know where they're at.
Exactly.
And most women kind of think of this as being fertile and then menopause. So it's kind of like these 2 phases. And so I think there's a lot of learning that often happens in a visit when we start talking about, actually, there's 3 phases of ovarian function: reproductive, perimenopause, and menopause, and being able to kind of walk through what the definition of each of those is, and then to kind of plug her in where she's at. It just kind of makes everything make sense.
Exactly. And, it's so interesting because lately it seems to be more of a topic. In perimenopause, there's times where estrogen is really low. So irritability, hot flashes, night sweats, vaginal dryness, bladder urgency. But there's also times in perimenopause when estrogen is really high, because the ovary doesn't work well. So the brain yells at it louder, and all of a sudden the ovary's like, fine, I'm going to make 3 eggs. So estrogen levels, I checked Gail's estrogen the other day, she really wanted to know. It was 660. That's huge. That's so high. And so with that high estrogen comes crazy breast tenderness, being bloated, crying at the drop of a hat, thinking everyone's talking about you. It's like teenage girl times 20, so it's like estrogen really high, and then 2 weeks, maybe even 3 days later, estrogen really low. So it truly is a roller coaster.
Thank God this is happening to women. I don't think men would be able to handle this.
We wouldn't be able to handle them having this. So I'm glad they don't. Excuse me.
Right, number 2.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I love that. Number 2, get started on your own with seeds. Who wants to take this?
Yeah, I think I reviewed what the seeds stood for, those 7 essential habits of daily success. And so it's just always a really good starting place. The analogy I always give is like building a home, and what's the foundation that you're going to choose to build it on. If you choose to build a house on a sandy beach, it's probably not going to last very long. And so seeds, I think of that as kind of the foundation where there's sort of these non-negotiable things. If you decide and you want to take action to make a shift, I mean, these are just simple things to start with. And sometimes they're too simple. It seems too simple to think about the fact that drinking more water could actually help, but it actually affects everything. And so that's
Really
what the seeds
does.
are kind of intended.
Well, I've chosen to take estrogen, so I use an estrogen patch, but sometimes I'll still get a hot flash. And so what I do is, go right to the seeds list. And so I'll say, okay, did I drink my water? Did I get sleep? No. Did I, did I have an extra treat? Did I, have a glass of wine? So again, it helps, us know that these symptoms can be triggered, even though someone takes estrogen. Or takes a medication for a symptom, or is doing everything like mostly well, but yet then all of a sudden has a symptom, usually we can figure it out with a trigger. I just quickly want to respond to Deb. Thank you so much for that huge compliment. I'll be returning to the complete program this summer. I've moved to Arizona for 8 months and still so spoiled by the True family. So again, that's so honoring, and we love having you in our family. So thank you so much. And Ingrid, huge compliment as well. Thinking out loud, I think that's part of being curious. I think it's really important that we can think out loud together and not just, here's a problem, here's the prescription, have a good life. It's really thinking out loud, and that's how we all learn. You all patients have taught me so much. Like, we wouldn't be here if we didn't learn from you and learn our approach.
I think it's about getting really personal about it. It's like the symptoms that patients come in with are like really personal, and they're really special. And, it's a special space that we hold with them when we have the opportunity to talk about it. And so it's so much more than like trying to figure out this medical diagnosis or coming up with what medication. It's really about like really getting into that space and kind of figuring out what's going to work here and coming up with a plan that's like personalized, that fits for her and not necessarily everybody else.
And so many people will say, like, every time I come in, I cry. And I'm like, the other day, it was so personal and like touching, like she's crying, I'm crying, we're all crying, so it's just really, again, it's such a sacred space that we, get to have with our patients.
Yeah. And the crying means that we're talking about things that matter, right?
That's right. And it's safe.
Yeah.
All right. Number 3, take the menopause resistance scale quiz on our website. So I think it can be really interesting to even just get started and just sort of to see where you're at. If you've never even thought about it, if you're kind of headed into the perimenopause time, it can be helpful to think about it.
That's right. So this scale has 7 questions, and like Suzanne talked about, each one is a 3, which is good, 1, which is difficult. And this was something that we were able to validate with patients. I developed it with patient language and did a study and looked at it and validated against all the other symptom scores that are out there that are very long, multiple questions, and just really hard to use in an office setting. So, I'm very proud that this was published as a validated symptom scale last year in the journal Menopause. And so very proud that it really is validated for menopause. Like, it's not just random symptoms, put together. So it really does measure menopause, and I'm very proud that we have this.
Awesome.
Actually, I just got an email from a medical group in Turkey who want to validate it in Turkish, in a Turkish population. So I need to respond to that and see if we can figure that out, that they could validate this in Turkey. So I'm excited about that. Okay, number 4, know your options for HRT. 15 years ago, I didn't know anything about HRT, and the big study about HRT had come out in 2003 and really scared a lot of women off of hormones. And, it's way safer than most people think. This could be a whole hour conversation, which I won't go to in now at all. But basically, it's really important to know your options. And it's, again, way safer than people think. Again, it's to know your options. It's to ask the questions, what works for me, what's safe for me. We document every time we see you what risk factors you might have that would make hormones not safe for you. I always tell our patients, safety first, happy second. And so we look at what are the pros and cons, what are the risks. We have that informed consent. There's some patients for who it's a really easy yes, of course. You don't have risk factors. There's some where maybe they had a provoked blood clot in their legs years ago, or their mom had blood clots and we have to do some blood tests first to figure it out. So, again, we're all certified menopause practitioners with the North American Menopause Society. We know the rules, we stay up to date, we go to the meetings, we learn about new therapies as they come out, we learn about new ways to use this therapy. And we're able to make those discussions, and we have people across the nation. So if there's a question we can't answer, we don't know the answer to, and we want to make sure we're making the right decision, we've got people we can call who know the data better than we do. So again, it's all about safety first.
Yeah.
So,
and I would say that, if you ever have a conversation with a provider who gives you a hard no or a hard yes in either direction, that's probably not the right answer. It is worth a discussion with every patient. And, we hope to be able to provide the time and thorough assessment for patients to review all their options and talk about the risk and benefits. But that's probably how it should be, because I think a lot of the time patients will come in and say, I talked to this provider and they just said no. And it's like, well, that's, I've probably done a 180 myself in understanding hormone replacement therapy and moved from someone with more education moved from someone who said, a hard no. And then I, sort of did more education. I'm kind of in that phase where I'm like, it may be right for the right people. And
right.
There's, as Dana said, there's a lot of people that it's very an easy yes. And then there's some that we talk about and, in our clinical meetings.
Right.
So,
well, about, I think it was like 6 years ago, I participated in surveying residents that were graduating from internal medicine programs, OB programs, and family medicine programs. And there were 6 sites across the country. The principal author was Dr. Kling at Mayo Clinic. And so we put all that data together and found out that less than 10% of graduating residents from even OBGYN programs, less than 10% of providers are comfortable taking care of women in menopause and talking about hormones. Less than 10%. So again, the more that you all demand this and demand to see a certified menopause provider to talk about this. I had a patient who came to see us for a second opinion because her doctor told her that she couldn't have hormones because his grandma had breast cancer. So I don't mean disrespect. It's just a lack of knowledge. And, we all want, again, it's important to really make sure and ask. And if your provider doesn't know, it's okay. We can't all know everything. Then ask for a referral to a certified menopause provider.
Yep. All right. Number 5.
Number 5.
Know your options for weight loss medicines. Very similar, right? There were some weight loss medicines that were pulled from the market and sort of were deemed unsafe to be used with the general population, but there's a lot of really safe ones that are out there now. And it's definitely worth a conversation if you're struggling to lose weight or if you're struggling with your relationship with food, just to know your options and kind of have that conversation. Not every medicine is right for every patient. And, we hope to have that fair discussion with patients.
Exactly. So,
all right.
Valerie, so glad. Go ahead.
Will you be introducing a new app at some point?
Sure would like to. So we're working on another company called Curia, which is a digital health program that can allow people to follow their symptoms and know their phase of ovarian function and go through an algorithm for treatment of menopause symptoms. So we'll see how that interacts with True. So please stay tuned. We loved our app that we had right when we opened True. And unfortunately, that went away, but we're looking to do this because it was such a great tool. And as we know, like people use period trackers. So we think it's very important that we can have menopause trackers. So we're very much working to make that happen, Val. So thanks for asking about that. So on that note, I am so grateful that you've all joined us tonight. Dr. Egan, do you want to talk about this?
Yes, thank goodness I got reminded.
Yes, thanks.
So next Tuesday, we're having an event that's welcome to all women, even if they're not current patients of ours. And we are hoping to highlight a test that we offer at True. The company's called Gallery, and the test is called Grail. And it's really exciting. It is the future. This is a blood test that is a screening test for up to about 50 different cancers. And what it's looking for is specific cancer DNA signals that are there. This does not replace our mammograms or colonoscopy or cervical cancer screening. This should be in addition to all those sort of cancer screenings. And, the ones that we're really looking for are a lot of times those cancers that can really quietly grow and not have any symptoms until they're in a advanced stage and can really increase mortality, particularly ovarian cancer, pancreatic cancer, and some of the other GI cancers. And so, one of my privileges of being at True is that I have the time and logistics to be able to reach out to, these different companies, learn and understand about the new science, and then be able to offer it to patients. We are also offering to husbands too, if they're really interested. And, we don't get any money here at True for doing this. This is really just to provide new technologies to patients so they can understand what's out there and then get any sort of health benefits that they need. So this will be next Tuesday at 5:30. We'll just give a little bit of talk to so patients can better understand what the test they're getting, and then the phlebotomist will be there to draw the blood if that's what they want to do.
Awesome. No, I'm so glad you're spearheading this, Celia. Thank you so much. And again, I just want to come back to our why. We want all women to have the information that they can make decisions for themselves and not be at the mercy of providers like me 15 years ago who didn't know anything about menopause or hormones. So we want women to have information at their fingertips, including if they're at risk for cancer, and we do genetic testing and for our patients to see Suzanne and talk about that test and tests like Gallery. But we want women to have information that they can make their decisions and reach their goals.
Yeah.
Jennifer has a question, Celia, I think for you.
Yeah, I thought about being screened, but part of me just wants to keep working on wellness. I'm not sure I want to know the results of this test. I know it can feel really frightening to think that there could be cancer inside of you and, just kind of fingers crossed, hope that it goes away. I think one of the why we are offering this test is honestly because we can really save someone's life. If you find something like a pancreatic cancer or an ovarian cancer early, it can be removed and you can be cured. And so that's really the point of getting some of this testing done, is so that we can really find these things and cure patients versus, obviously some of these cancers really end women's life that can be way too soon, which can be, obviously terrible.
Or even to minimize treatment, right?
I'm sorry.
Even just to minimize treatment. Maybe it's just a surgery and way to avoid 100%. Chemotherapy, for example.
Yes.
Yep. Excuse me.
Yep. Yes. And it just, we, as a lot of women know, they always know someone that was sort of cut down in the prime of their life by cancer. And so this is the future of where we'll probably go with cancer screening, in addition to the other cancer screening techniques that we have.
And its focus is on those cancers that we don't really have other good screening tools for. Like, for example, breast cancer, we have great screening tools for that, but other unusual cancers like gallbladder cancer and things, it's like there's not a way to find it early. And so it's a really innovative, new, forward-thinking tool.
Yeah. And this test is available, honestly, for our patients at any time. We just wanted to provide a platform in case people had other questions and kind of speak to it at a global event. So
sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, I think, as everyone can see, we could talk forever, as we do at the office, and we love what we do. So everyone, please check us out at truewomenshealth.com. Let your friends and family know we're here and we're happy to help. So
all right.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.